studied economics. As you and I discussed lunch, economics is a terrible waste of time. So I left and joined the training program at Shearson. That was particularly valuable. They had a training program where you spent a month in each department of brokerage house, orders, margin, purchase and sales, proxy, and so forth. So it was great training to start to understand the brokerage industry.
And what area did you go into with that education?
I then became an analyst, a full-fledged analyst, originally a coal analyst and an automobile analyst. And interestingly enough, I was a conventional analyst in a wirehouse looking at earnings per share and price-earnings ratios, which was almost as unsatisfactory as being an economist. So I slowly, with the influence of friends, graduated to more of a Gestaltist approach. Like much of what goes on in this press, where there was some emphasis on creditworthiness, we emphasize creditworthiness, you better pay attention to the balance sheet.
Was there a distressed debt sector in those days?
No, I didn't do distress. There was distress debt. I may have done some St. Paul, but very little. Not until I left Shearson in '56 and joined the Rosenwald family.
And the Rosenwald family were co-founders of Sears Roebuck?
Yeah, these were the children of the founders of Sears Roebuck. And that was especially good training because it was a combination or a triplet of people who did not only passive investing, but also controlled investing. And in passive investing, they ran a subordinated portfolio consisting mostly of convertibles, and also was very important in a training sense and to understand distress. Believe it or not, Bill Rosenwald had been the trustee of the Tuskegee Institute and also responsible for the books, and therefore to get context, one had to learn a lot about not-for-profit accounting.
So Rosenwald was a learning experience for you?
A great learning experience, probably the best.
How long were you with Rosenwald?
I was with Rosenwald 2 years, and I went to Latin with Coleman in 1960. We moved to Philadelphia, and I became a partner of Gerstly Sunstein, a regional brokerage firm. Stayed there till '67, then moved back to New York.
When did you meet Lois?
In Tanglewood in 1956. People go to Tanglewood for music. I went to meet women.
You've always had your eye on the hands.
Yeah, I was 55. I'm married 56.
Some people would describe you as the father of activist investing. Would you agree?
Activist?
Activist.
No, I would not agree.
How would you describe yourself?
Well, there are two things. In distress, I think it is very hard to be a distressed investor unless you're an activist, at least in terms of negotiating and contributing to reorganizations or liquidations. Then there's the other side of investing, really an outgrowth of distressed investing, in what we do in common stocks. Now, there are a lot of very, very capable people who will not do common stocks unless there can be a catalyst, an element of control. And indeed, you get people like Icon and Loeb, who finally figured out is, if there is no catalyst, I'll be the catalyst and do it in investment. But that's not what we do, or I do, in watching my wife's money. we do four things, and a direct outgrowth of experience in this business. We only buy into common stocks if the company has a super strong financial position. That is an outgrowth of distressed investing. Well, as an investor, I normally try to focus on the fulcrum security, the most senior issue that's going to participate in a reorganization. If the company has a super strong financial position, the fulcrum security is a common stock. Second thing we do in investing, these are all passive, not activist, is we're very, very price conscious. I'd say the average security we would buy is a discount of average perhaps 50% of readily ascertainable net asset value. Readily ascertainable means it's not rocket science. Third is we only invest in common stocks, unlike activists, where there are full disclosure in England, reliable audits, and where the securities are traded in markets that are highly regulated and give tremendous investor protections. Three examples being US, Canada, Hong Kong. And the fourth characteristic, the only one you really have to bring judgment to, the first three are pretty easy to measure, is we try to identify businesses that are going to grow their NAV by a double-digit figure compounded, say, over the next 3 to 7 years. But that's what we do in investing. I'm not going to do distress unless I can be an activist who just took the business in common stock. I can be passive.
Well, what led you to invest in companies like Penn Central, General Public Utility, PSNH? Heavily in the utility area.
It's so, in the early 70s, I decided to go into business for myself. At a time, I had 3 kids and a wife with no money. And
you learn from your mistakes.
So I wanted to do corporate finance. I figured if I couldn't make it alone, I could get a job. So anyway, there were 2 areas of corporate finance in the 70s that, believe it or not, no respectable investment banker would touch. One was stockholder litigation, and the other was bankruptcy. So I started out in bankruptcy as a professional. Being a solo practitioner, as the 70s went on, I couldn't charge like Loeb and Goldman Sachs charged. I think, I better spend my time being an investor. Which is
what you came to the conclusion that advisors weren't paid well?
They were paid better than when I went into business. And it's escalated ever since. I should have stayed in advising. And then, but that was that business. Then, as the stockholder litigation business evolved, it was a very, very good business for me. Originally,
on what side of the equation?
Well, originally I was plaintiffs. I was close with a Pomerantz.
And Pomerantz was the leading
Yeah, but then there's been, well, I did defendants, but interestingly enough, I did government. I did, in the 70s, I was doing most of the PBG scheme workouts. I was advisor to the antitrust division of the Department of Justice. But then, fortunately, I got hired, retained as a financial advisor to the President's Commission on the Accident at 3 Mile Island. There really wasn't much financial issues there, except some phony issues raised by Ralph Nader and his people. But it was a great opportunity to learn the electric utility business. Then that assignment, and
What's the nature of that assignment?
well,
At General Public Utilities in 3 Mile Island?
it was an integrated public utility with 3 subsidiaries: Jersey Central Power and Light, Pennsylvania Power Light, one of the Monongahela Power. In any event, I particularly remember it because I was smart enough to buy Jersey, after I learned something, buy Jersey Central mortgage bonds, and it was perhaps a 20% yield to maturity, absolutely safe.
Were you concerned that GPU was going to end up in bankruptcy?
Only the mortgage bond, the first mortgage, I don't think it made any difference. I would get either it's going to stay solvent.
Well, there was a big issue as to whether each of the operating subsidiaries could get rate increases. And without rate increases, as I recall,
as I recall, I concluded it didn't make any difference to a first mortgage bond of electric utility.
How do you foreclose on a nuclear plant? You said you went to get the uranium?
Look at the other assets. Nuclear plant or?
Well, I have to know a little bit about GPU because there's a big issue in GPU as to whether they should get rate increases in the various states. And I was the witness that would go in and say, well, if they don't get the rate increases, they don't get it.
Well, if they went in bankruptcy,
Well,
how would the first mortgages fare?
well, we're going to make a distribution of pieces of uranium.
But the probability, I concluded, rightly or wrongly, the probabilities of the first mortgages being impaired was remote.
And you did pretty well.
Did pretty well. But then in 1984, to talk about I was retained in secret by Long Island Lighting, who at the time of the Shoreham matter, to explore bankruptcy scenarios, which was good education, but a waste of money as far as Long Island Lighting was concerned because of Jen. And when I sent in my report about how to reorganize, the chairman said to me, I don't need this job. When I came in, there were 110 million shares outstanding, and when I leave, there will be 110 million common shares outstanding. But right after that, I then wrote a long piece based on my utility experience of what would be like if public service in New Hampshire and Consumer Power of Michigan went bankrupt. And through that report, I got the City Corp, which then put up $100 million in a joint venture where we bought up second and third mortgage bonds. It was a nice, profitable investment, but I misidentified the Fulcrum security. It happened to be a common stock of public service in New Hampshire. not the second and third mortgage. And then,
Marty, you started your own brokerage firm in 1974?
yeah, a May Day.
And you did that, what was the rationale for doing that? Being an investor rather than an advisor?
Yeah, I had a few clients, and it was only just a small brokerage firm. If I have many talents, sales is not one of them. Never had a big business until I got these good guys. Third Avenue would have been a very small.
Suspicious looking guys over there?
The Third Avenue guys over there. But that was after that, one of the things about being in distress, as you know, it's a confrontational business. If you want to be a lover, do mergers and acquisitions, not distress. So I was sort of involved with confrontation, and did, as you could in those days, you can't do, did a hostile takeover of closed-end mutual fund equity strategies. That was in 83 or 84. I then I open-ended equity strategies when I got control of it, and used it to buy out the banks in a Chapter 11 company, Anglo Energy. At that time, we did what at the time I thought was the first pre-pack ever done. And we did an all-equity reorganization, and Anglo Energy became Neighbors Industries, the world's largest land driller, dominant factor in the industry. My problem in having equity strategies buy out the banks is we were small and I'm not very sales oriented, and we could never get the requisite diversification to be a subchapter M corporation, always taxed as a C corporation. So I got out of that bind by merging in a C reorganization into Neighbors Industries, and all my stockholders got, the equity strategy stockholders got Neighbors stock at maybe a cost of $1 or less, and that was a good deal. And at this time, I had discovered that fund management was a license to steal. Having the old bridge,
He's not to be quoted on.
not as lucrative as being the bankruptcy professional, but also there's no credit risk,
bank accounts with
there's no inventory, you were the overhead. I decided after the merger I wasn't going to just abandon this fee-generating business, and in 1990 we started Third Avenue as a successor.
But prior to 1991, the volume of debt trading was not very high.
The volume of what?
Debt trading.
Yeah.
Because of bankruptcy court restrictions. How did you operate or pursue restructurings or investment in debt as private?
It was hard, like being in Oakland security meant we were buying a lot of bank debt. In those days, you agreed on terms, price. It took 6 to 8 weeks to get the closing. So reps and warranties, assignments, and all sorts of contractual provisions. So I was doing a lot of that very successfully, and I decided one of the few smart things I did, I don't do too many smart things, I decided, why don't I hire in-house counsel instead of shipping out to law firms? And I hired David Borst, and we did bank debt together. And David is not only a very talented bankruptcy attorney, but he's also a terrific executive, and he became the CEO of Third Avenue and grew the business. And I just kept watching the investments.
You're a lucky guy to have it.
Isn't it? You know, and then we had Covanta.
You get a bonus this year.
Yeah, I'll bet. You're just saying that for public consumption.
Value investing for a long time appeared to be based on prolific writers Benjamin Graham and David Dodd. Do G&D set the standard for intelligent value investing?
No.
Why not?
One, they're basically top down. But most important, they were very good for what existed through the 60s when they were there. Subsequent, I'm sure it's subsequent to the Securities Act amendments of 1964, there has been in this country and Canada a disclosure explosion. It is now possible to know a tremendous, not only in Chapter 11, but in the general market, to know tremendous amounts about a tremendous number of companies, something that was unavailable to Graham and Dodd. And really, in many, many areas, you can do terrific bottom-up investing, not only in equities, but also in distress. The disclosure system is so good. It just was not available to Graham and Dodd. And scholarship-wise, the bad thing that happened, there was no successor to Graham and Dodd. The modern capital theorists, mostly from the University of Chicago and other place, took over. And these are people who study markets and securities prices, understanding a company, understanding the securities it issues is somebody else's business. It's not what they do. So that in general, until our new book, Modern Security Analysis, was supposed to be a successor to Graham and Dodd, came out, there really been nothing other than really academic nonsense. You study markets. It's impossible using their system to be above an investor either in equities or distress.
You don't think much of the Chicago School of Economics?
No, I do not.
What is your premise for value investing? What is your premise for value investing?
Bottom up is much more important than top down.
How do you get that information? Is it financial statements, cash flows important?
The whole disclosure system,
How do you get into determining creditworthiness?
mostly from the financial statements. It's normally, it's not that hard. It's a balance sheet. It's a whole financial statements, including the footnotes, and there may be things that are not in the footnotes. But you can determine creditworthiness. One of the, let's say, there are 4 problems with conventional security analysis that don't exist with value analysis or control investing. And one is in conventional analysis, there is assumed to be a primacy of the income account, whether it's cash flows or earnings, with earnings defined as creating wealth while consuming cash. Indeed, since 2008, even Harvey Miller will admit if there's a primacy of anything, it's creditworthiness.
I think so.
I think, you know, everybody in this room
But you're
would admit it. So that's one of their shortcomings. Another is short-termism. You cannot, you tell us to hire. Wait, there is no way that I can figure out that you can be focused on market prices without being short-term. I can't do it. The third thing is, in conventional house, there's always this huge emphasis on top-down rather than bottom-up. And you're looking at the Dow Jones average or depressions or the housing crisis. You know, for that I have two responses, particularly for those of us in this room. If you're adequately secured creditor, you really don't have to worry too much about the business cycle, whether it's 1929, 1974, 1987, 2008, 2009. If you top that. And two,
But how do you determine the intrinsic value of the collateral? There are different kinds of collateral.
yeah, well, you focus on those that are readily ascertainable. Let's say like income producing real estate, utility plant. There are certain things you can't do. But if you want to be an adequately secured creditor, you pick on the security that's measurable and realizable.
So you've got to select a collateral security package that can be converted to cash within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, either that or it will continue to generate cash or earnings.
And that's
It may have been tough for Graham and Dodd, but it's not tough for you.
because of the information that's available.
Information is, yeah,
Has technology changed that? Is there more information available today?
yeah. I'm too old to use all of it, but it keeps getting better and better. Let's say,
But wait a minute, you said financial statements should be prepared under the assumption that the users of such financial statements are reasonably intelligent,
yes,
reasonably diligent,
yes,
and are people who understand not only the uses, but also the limitations of GAAP.
yes,
And you think that assumption's correct?
I think.
You think most of the people in this room are
Reasonably
reasonably intelligent?
They wouldn't be here if they weren't.
Let me give you what's of you.
And,
Does GAAP accounting enable one to determine the true value of an enterprise?
well, for us, IFRS does it better than GAAP, but GAAP does it okay.
Does GAAP favor short-term speculators?
Huh?
Does GAAP favor short-term speculators?
I don't, yeah, I guess in a way it does. All this University of Chicago and short-term is completely valid for what I call sudden death securities. Options, warrants, risk arbitrage, debt with short fuse maturity. It just doesn't generally fit with most of what goes on in distress and most of what goes on in the equity investing world, particularly when you add in, as part of equity investing, control investing, credit analysis, and venture capital investing. So I think this kind of thing I'm talking about is a majority of investing.
Is EBITDA or its variations reliable guideposts to investing?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
That's good.
There are depreciation, which is a non-cash charge. Let's say even it's a non-cash charge for office buildings, and the same type of depreciation charge is probably an expense for hotels. They got to replace the mattress every month or something. So you can do the analysis.
You think EBS is a better?
Huh?
EBS. You know what EBS is?
is valid if you want to focus on companies as operations. If you want to be like us and look at companies not only as operators, but also as investors and financiers, the bad stuff should be included. But if you want to be a short-run, high-frequency trader, I guess it has some meaning. That's not what you do in distress. It's not what we do in value investing. We look at the thing as both as, not only as an operation, but probably more importantly, as entities that are investors and financiers.
Has the growth of hedge funds and their activity?
And they certainly have a role. I am of the strong opinion that regulation does stifle productivity, but that's not the end of the game. If you have financial institutions with power to create money, they better be strictly regulated, or we're going to have 2008 again every year for 3 years.
Well, in that perspective, what's your view of too big to fail? A view of too big to fail?
Only concept. And it's very important to say to this audience, there is no such thing as too big to fail. It is too important not to be reorganized or liquidated efficiently and expeditiously. So there always will be failures, and I think we as social citizens have a role in promulgating systems that make reorganizations and liquidations efficient, expeditious. There is some start of that by the federal government now getting rules to reorganize what they call too big to fail. And the concept I would use is too important not to be reorganized efficiently and expeditiously. And we've come a long way, hopefully, after 2008, where we've had efficient and expeditious reorganizations at General Motors, Chrysler, CIT, the banks, AIG.
So
it could have been done more efficiently and more expeditiously, but we're going to...
Would it be fair to say, Marty, if you think there are situations where government intervention is appropriate?
Absolutely necessary. If anything, as those all of us in this room know, capital markets are notoriously capricious, and sometimes they're not available at all. They just freeze up. 2008. Who's gonna finance the banks? And they'll have to go out of business. I think, again about TARP, everybody says I'm wrong. I wish TARP was absolutely essential, not too big to fail. I wish it had been done by the private sector, maybe led by Harvey Miller. Then enough terms would have been inflicted on the borrowing institutions to get things done, like start to solve the housing crisis and so forth. I think we very much need that, and we certainly need, forget about too big to fail. We need to be too important not to be reorganized expeditiously and efficiently. And it looks to me, I don't know about you, Harvey, it looks to me, big as the problem is here, it's even bigger in Europe, especially Southern Europe.
Are there organizations, in your view, that are too big to manage?
Probably, but I'm looking for names.
Do you think there's an institutional memory in this country?
Not with you, they forget everything.
So we go 180 degrees, right? Go right back to where we started.
How many people who were alive in 2000 bought Twitter? recently. And all those people who bought Twitter were alive in 2000, forget 2000.
But what's your views on Dodd-Frank? Is it good, bad? Or?
I really don't know enough.
What, you don't have to answer this one, okay?
Huh?
You don't have to answer this, but what are your views on activists like Carl Icahn, Bill Ackman?
I think they're very smart. I wonder it's just that I'm a pacifist and lazy, that I'm not in their business. Because being in the business of creating catalysts can be very profitable. I guess you're asking me whether it's constructive to the company or not, I don't know. But instead of buying at 60% discounts like I do, maybe I ought to be like Carl and buy a 20%. You know, where I figure out a 20% discount and then be very active. Legitimate function.
Have you done business with Carl?
Yeah, I called when I was in stockholder litigation. I got retained by Carl a few times. Then
Did he ever pay you?
slowly. But then we are very friendly. We used to play tennis with him. Carl Icahn is the only man I've ever met who bets tennis points. It was great. And then, I won't tell you, but Lois can tell you what happened when we went to Carl's Christmas party. He's a very humorous.
If you had to pick the most significant event in relation to controlled investment during your career, what would be that achievement?
I don't know.
Other than picking David Boss.
I guess getting control of neighbors and bringing in new management who really built that business.
Okay. If you had to pick the biggest mistake or error you made in your career, what was that mistake?
MBIA comment. Bad analysis. They were supposed to underwrite to a zero loss. I was still by the management and signed off on it. It was, I think my biggest mistake was a lazy man's mistake.
Okay. You said that the great economists such as Keynes, Friedman, Hayek, Modigliani, and Miller probably could have learned a lot from value investors. What do you mean by that statement?
Well, in the case of Keynes, no focus on credit analysis. In the case of Milton Friedman, who wanted liberty for everybody and didn't want government regulation, he did not understand that the corporate world would not function at all unless there was a lot of coercion. You coerce all the time to operate in the corporate world. So let's suppose you want to do a merger, you get the requisite vote, everybody's bound. And to talk about if you don't have government, you don't have conversion, is done by somebody from the University of Chicago who doesn't understand business. As for Hayek, if you read Hayek, all he ever did was set up a straw man, a phony straw man, and then draw conclusions. He said socialism was terrible. Just look at the Soviet Union, where it was terrible. But I don't know that went to Sweden or that. He just missed what he should have. Capitalism is much better than the government. But to say because the Soviet Union is a murderous dictatorship, no government ownership, makes any sense. Didn't make much sense to me.
Okay, now, Marty, here's a good question for you. What are your views on the economy? And what advice would you give to investors and professionals today?
My views on the economy are the bottom up is so much more important than the top down. And at the end of the day, for what we do, as with religious as folks do, I would worry too much to accept the probabilities of social unrest and violence in the streets. The United States is more stable than anybody except maybe Canada in that respect. Again, I repeat, I don't know how bad times will be, but if they get like 2008 again, there's a probability there's going to be great opportunities for us. Within the distress business, there's not only performing loans that are going to remain performing loans, there's PPAC reorganizations, there's purchasing assets in 363 sales, and that great growth industry making capital infusions to fix troubled companies.
And when is this all going to start?
Next week.
Well, David Boss has said to some people, if you were a major investor with Bernie Madoff, is that true?
Trying to get me fired.
How do you account for all these Ponzi schemes?
I don't come from.
On all these, the number of Ponzi schemes that have been uncovered.
In a sense, from what I said before, everything starts out as a Ponzi scheme, and then you buy off on, when you have to buy off, the debt is never repaid, it is refinanced and expanded as entities make creditworthy. The thing that makes the Ponzi scheme is distinct from something productive is use of proceeds. If the use of proceeds, we don't incur increasing amount of debt, but if the use of proceeds is to pay exiting people, then you got a Ponzi scheme. But most of the time, in most of what we're involved, the continual incurrence of debt as a constructive use of proceeds.
Okay, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions in a moment. Anybody would like to ask a question? There's no charge for this. You must have been, wait. Yes, sir. Did you identify
Evaluating
yourself?
a company, how do you take into account, or do you take into account unfunded pension liabilities?
How do I take it into account? I don't know. I guess I look at the financial statements and increase the potential liability. It's a real problem.
In regards to how you're looking at the company, do you care about it, or?
Very, very, very much so. I think, by the way, in our portfolios, our equity portfolios, we tend to be very heavily into companies that are not labor intensive. Whether it's real estate, electric utilities, you will find there that the pension problems aren't huge because they're not labor intensive businesses, but it certainly is a real problem and very frequently a showstopper. If I'm looking at things we can't conclude, I can't conclude that things are creditworthy, my wife's money does not go there. And I certainly have a role. I am of the strong opinion that regulation does stifle productivity, but that's not the end of the game. If you have financial institutions with the power to create money, they better be strictly regulated, or we're going to have 2008 again every year for 3 years.
Well, in that perspective, what's your view of too big to fail? A view of too big to fail?
Only concept. And it's very important to say to this audience, there is no such thing as too big to fail. It is too important not to be reorganized or liquidated efficiently and expeditiously. So there always will be failures, and I think we as social citizens have a role in promulgating systems that make reorganizations and liquidations efficient, expeditious. There is some start of that in the federal government now getting rules to reorganize what they call too big to fail. And the concept I would use is too important not to be reorganized efficiently and expeditiously. And we've come a long way, hopefully, after 2008, where we've had efficient and expeditious reorganizations at General Motors, Chrysler, CIT, the banks, AIG.
So
It could have been done more efficiently and more expeditiously, but we're going to...
would it be fair to say, Marty, if you think there are situations where government intervention is appropriate?
Absolutely necessary. If anything, as those all of us in this room know, capital markets are notoriously capricious, and sometimes they're not available at all. They just freeze up 2008. Who's gonna finance the banks? And they'll let them go out of business. I think, again about TARP, everybody says I'm wrong. I wish TARP was absolutely essential, not too big to fail.